My name is Ruby. I'm 34 years old, currently working as a user interface designer in San Francisco. That afternoon, I sat alone in my tiny apartment, watching the live stream of my half sister's wedding, a sister I was never truly close to. My family said I wasn't invited due to limited seating, but they sent me a link along with a few polite words. When the camera panned across the front row, I nearly dropped the glass of water in my hand. Amid the familiar faces, there was one person who absolutely shouldn't have been there. The man I once loved with everything I had. The man my family told me had died 6 years ago in a car crash. He was smiling, raising a glass, seated right next to my father. The live stream suddenly froze, pausing right at the moment he looked directly into the camera. Have you ever believed someone was dead, only to find out it was all a lie? If this story sends a chill down your spine, leave a comment below, hit like, and subscribe to the channel to hear the truth behind that look and why that single moment shattered my entire world. I met Ryan the fall I turned 27, right after I moved to Portland for graduate school in interaction design. We met at a local art exhibit. He was standing silently in front of a black and white abstract photo. He didn't seem like someone who showed emotions easily, but there was a depth in his eyes. I hadn't planned to speak to him, but as I walked past, he quietly said, "This one makes me feel like I'm missing something I've never actually had." I turned, surprised, and replied, "Maybe because it's empty, the way vague memories feel." We stood there for a few more minutes, then ended up walking to a nearby cafe. That conversation lasted until 9 p.m. Ryan was a software engineer, building a data management tool for a small startup. He was smart, calm, and had a quiet, dry sense of humor. We didn't fall for each other instantly, but with each meeting, another wall came down. After 3 months, I realized I had started picturing him in even the smallest details of my life. He appeared in my weekend plans, in my thoughts when I doubted work or family. I used to believe that adult love was dry and calculated, but with Ryan it was gentle and steady, like a hidden current running through stone. A year later, he proposed with a small silver ring into which he had set a pale blue stone, my favorite color since childhood, though I had never told anyone. "I just knew," Ryan said, "because your eyes always linger longer when you see this color." I laughed as tears ran down my face. We planned a simple wedding the following spring. My mother had passed when I was young, and I was mostly raised by my father, Charles, a successful real estate executive, emotionally distant, and someone who valued reputation above affection. He never outright forbade my relationships, but he never supported them either. Especially not with Ryan, whom he saw as lacking potential and unfit for this family. I didn't care. At the time, I believed love would melt away any prejudice. I was wrong. Just a few months before the wedding, Ryan had a short business trip to Eugene. He texted me at 6 p.m., running a little late, grabbing that wine you love. I still have that message. Close to midnight, I got a call from my father. His voice had no emotion. There was an accident on the highway. Ryan's car collided head-on with a truck. It caught fire. No one survived. I froze. "Dad, what are you saying? Ryan can't be—" The body wasn't intact. Police confirmed identity through the license plate and a wallet found in the ashes. He spoke like reading a report. I screamed, demanded to go to the scene, to see a death certificate, anything. But my father stopped me, saying I shouldn't see what was left. He claimed he handled everything so I wouldn't suffer more. "The funeral will be private," Ryan's family agreed. I remember that funeral clearly. Just a few people standing in silence, no open casket, no pictures, and none of Ryan's family showed up. I sat there with a blank stare, clutching a piece of paper with his name on it. Everything happened so fast, I had no time to think or question. The months after blurred into a fog. I dropped out of school, left Portland, and moved in with an old friend in San Jose, just trying not to completely fall apart. A year later, I started to rebuild. I moved to San Francisco and restarted my career in design. One day, while applying to rent an apartment, I needed to find old financial records. When I logged into the bank account Ryan and I once shared to retrieve a past transaction, I noticed it was still active, months after he was supposedly dead. I thought it was a system error. I called the bank. They said they couldn't give me any details since I wasn't an authorized user. I contacted the Eugene Police Department about the accident. They confirmed a crash happened on that day, but the victim was a man with a different name, not Ryan. I was stunned. I searched for a death certificate. There was no Ryan Thompson listed among the deceased that year. I confronted my father. I wasn't the panicked girl anymore. I demanded answers, detail by detail. He got angry and shouted, "You need to let it go. That chapter is over. Digging into the past will only hurt you more." I stood there, looking at the man who raised me, and felt like I was talking to a stranger. No explanations, no remorse. Everything I once believed felt twisted in his hands. I left that house that night, and for the next 6 years we only exchanged a few holiday texts. I tried to let the pain rest, but it was only sleeping, waiting to be awakened. Like the day I saw Ryan in that live stream, alive, smiling, sitting beside the man who had lied to me for all those years. I remember clearly the day my father brought Diane home. I was 17, had just finished my SATs, nervously anticipating college. Diane was nearly 20 years younger than my father. Honey blonde, soft-spoken, but with a piercing gaze that made me shiver the first time we met. She didn't need to say I wasn't welcome. The way she clung to my father's arm at dinner, the way she adjusted his napkin as if I weren't even there. It said enough. A year later, Vanessa was born. My father beamed as he showed me the ultrasound photo like it was his first time becoming a dad. I stood there, forcing a polite smile. I didn't resent the baby. How could I hate a newborn who didn't even understand this world yet? But I started to notice myself fading from my father's view. The photos I hung in our home were replaced by pictures of Deanne's baby bump. My room was converted into a nanny's room, then Vanessa's. When I asked why, he said, "You're grown. You don't need a private space here anymore." Holiday gatherings slowly excluded me. The Christmas I was 22, my father hosted a big party at his new home with Diane. I only found out from photos my mother's friends posted on social media. In them, Vanessa sat on a hired Santa's lap, next to a grand tree stretching toward the ceiling. I was in my small rental room cooking pasta, watching a movie alone, convincing myself I was fine. She still tried to keep that fragile thread of family intact. I sent birthday cards to Vanessa every year, along with gifts, usually books, art kits, or age-appropriate toys. But never once, not once, was I invited to her birthday. Even a thank you was rare. One year, I sent her a set of handcrafted maple wood dolls from Canada, something I skipped breakfast for a month to afford. My father texted she liked the gift. Thanks. Then, silence. When I asked, why wasn't I invited? He replied, "Diane wants to keep things simple. Fewer people, less hassle." I understood. To them, I was the hassle. Even as my relationship with my father grew colder, I still had my mom, the one person who quietly supported me, even if she didn't say much. She lived in Seattle with my aunt after the divorce. Her heart had weakened over the years. I tried to convince her to move in with me in San Francisco, but she just smiled and said, "I don't want to burden you. I've got my little corner here." The year I turned 30, she passed away. One gray morning, my aunt called me at 6:30. "Your mom's gone, Ruby. She passed peacefully, no pain." I went numb. I booked a flight, threw clothes into a bag. I arrived in Seattle by evening, still unable to believe it. I sat beside her casket, holding the same hands that once tucked me in at night, feeling completely hollow. I texted my dad. "Mom passed away. The funeral is Saturday." He only replied, "My condolences, will send flowers." No call, no visit, and it wasn't about distance. Seattle's just a few hours' drive from his house. On the day of the funeral, a large bouquet arrived, no card, no signature. I guessed it was from him. Probably Diane took care of it to check off the duty. Still, I stood and gave a eulogy. I spoke of my mom, her early mornings making me breakfast while I studied for the SATs, the times she took me stargazing, even as her heart struggled. I stood not only to say goodbye to her, but also to bury the last illusion I had about the family I kept trying to hold on to. After the funeral, I cut off all contact with my father for over a year. I didn't block him, I just stopped replying. The birthday wishes, the New Year messages, all stiff, dry lines that sounded obligatory. I only responded with one word: thanks. No anger, no blame, but no more expectations either. Then one morning, I received an email invitation to watch Vanessa's wedding via live stream. I thought I'd grown used to being pushed aside, but I still didn't expect that for an event as big as a wedding, I would be treated like a stranger. I stared at the sentence, "Due to limited guest capacity, we invite you to share in our joy virtually." A child I'd sent dozens of gifts to, who grew up in the house I once lived in, was now having a grand wedding in my father's mansion, and I wasn't allowed inside, only allowed to watch from afar. I stared at the computer screen, trying to stay calm. I told myself nothing could hurt me anymore. I was wrong. I sat frozen for nearly an hour after the screen froze. Ryan's face, or rather the man who used to be Ryan, remained clear, not even a bit blurry, as if the camera had deliberately locked onto that moment to plunge me into silence. I didn't cry. I had no more tears left strong enough to fall, only the sensation of something hollow being carved out of my chest. Once my breath steadied, I opened my laptop and typed in the name I had tried so hard to forget: Ryan Thompson. Nothing. No social media, no news, no business records. Everything stopped right after the accident. A perfect disappearance. But that live stream had just proved he hadn't disappeared. He had simply changed his name. I opened Instagram and searched hashtags related to the wedding. Vanessa Charles wedding, Hampton Estate July, VC wedding 2025. At first, it was just flowers, banquet tables, wedding gowns. But then I found a saved story highlight from one of the bridesmaids, a girl named Lily, Vanessa's close friend. It was a video from the engagement party 3 months earlier. I zoomed in, frame by frame. In the background, near the bar, a man stood with his back turned. He tilted his head, smiled at someone. I paused on that frame. The side profile, the features were unmistakable. Still him, the hair, the nose, the shoulders. But the tag on the post read, @Ethan Caldwell, official. I switched to searching Ethan Caldwell. The account popped up immediately. The profile photo was the same man from the wedding, standing next to my father at some ribbon-cutting ceremony. The bio was clear. Co-founder and CTO of Rensis Property Tech, Boston/San Francisco. Rensis Property Tech. I had never heard of this company, but the name sparked an unsettling feeling. I kept digging. The company website had a sleek white background, modern design, with a short introduction about property management software for medium and large businesses. I scrolled to the About Us section. There was Ethan in the middle of a group of investors standing right next to my father. The investor highlight section displayed the logo of Miller Development Corporation, the same corporation my father had built over 3 decades. I let out a quiet gasp. I went back to the company page, searching for legal registration info. Date of establishment, April 2019. The same month my father told me Ryan had died in a car crash. The company was founded 3 weeks after the funeral. I opened a new tab, logged into the Massachusetts Business Registry. Within minutes, the verification appeared. Ethan Caldwell, full name, Ethan R. Caldwell, born in 1988, the same year as Ryan. No name change records, no immigration files. So this identity wasn't legally transitioned? Or was it built from scratch? My heart was pounding so hard I could barely breathe. I went on to review Ethan's past social media activity. The oldest photo posted was from July 2019 at a tech conference in Chicago. Beneath the photo, a comment appeared from a now deleted account. "Didn't expect you to switch industries. Thought you were in finance?" Ethan had replied, "Sometimes you have to refresh everything." I froze on that line. Refresh everything? Or rebuild a life on the ashes of lies? Thought about all the things that had never quite added up. The rushed funeral, the body I wasn't allowed to see, the lack of a legitimate death certificate, the silence from Ryan's family. I had questioned it. I had asked. And my father had shut me down with one sentence. You need to let go. I remembered Ryan's eyes during the live stream. He didn't avoid the camera, didn't flinch, looked straight at it as if he knew exactly who was watching from the other side. I didn't know if it was defiance, a silent confession, or just coincidence. But whatever it was, the truth stood clear. He never died. And my father knew. I couldn't yet guess the reason, but the relationship between my father and Ryan, wasn't just a business connection. They were partners. My father had invested in the company Ryan led, and it all began right after the day I was told he was gone. I stepped away from my desk, walked to the window, and stared out at the city sinking into golden dusk. My breath fogged the cold glass. I didn't feel the same pain as before. What I felt now was something else, focused, steady, and fierce. I returned to my desk and opened a new notes folder, titling it, The Truth About Ethan Caldwell. I once loved a man. That man was erased from my world with a cold phone call from my own father. And now he was back, under a new name, seated among my family, about to marry the half-sister who had never once called me her sister. If this truth could be hidden for 6 years, I would peel back every layer until there was nothing left to hide. I no longer believed in coincidence. Everything had been orchestrated, and I would follow each link in that chain, even if it led me into the very darkness my father had spent a lifetime concealing. It took me 3 days to decide whether to contact a private investigator. The hesitation wasn't out of fear of being discovered, but because I knew once I crossed this line, there would be no going back. But on Wednesday evening, I opened my laptop and typed into the search bar, Private Investigator, San Francisco, Discreet. Her name came up near the top, Linda Brewster, a former FBI agent specializing in identity and financial fraud, now working independently. I read through old client reviews. Every single one said she was cold, precise, and never took a case unless she believed there was something worth uncovering. The next morning, I scheduled a meeting at a quiet suburban cafe I used to work from when I needed focus. Linda arrived right on time. She looked to be in her 50s, short silver hair, slender frame. But her eyes were razor sharp, like she could read every flicker of thought on your face. I need your help verifying the identity of a man named Ethan Caldwell, I began, sliding a printed image from the live stream across the table. I believe he was once Ryan Thompson, my ex-fiancé, who was reported dead in an accident 6 years ago. Linda didn't ask why I suspected him. She just nodded, pulled out a small notepad, jotted a few notes, and said simply, I'll look into it for 7 days, but if he has something to hide, I'll find it. I left the cafe with a strange cocktail of emotions. One half of me trembled at what I might uncover. The other half felt a quiet sense of relief. I wasn't alone anymore. I had handed this to someone who could stare the truth in the face without flinching. 6 days later, Linda called. I need to meet you in person. There are some details I can't share over the phone. Her voice held no emotion, but it made my heart race. We met again at the same cafe. Linda opened her bag and pulled out a stack of documents, neatly clipped inside a leather folder. Ethan Caldwell, she began, has no medical, academic, or tax records prior to 2019, which means he appeared out of thin air. But when I ran facial recognition software comparing old photos of Ryan Thompson with the new ones of Ethan, the match rate was over 98%. I nodded slightly. What I had suspected was now confirmed. He used to work as a software engineer at a company called Grey Loop Technologies, According to internal files, he abruptly quit in March 2019, just 3 weeks before the new company Rensis Property Tech was founded, with seed funding from the Miller Development Corporation, which means, Linda paused, looking at me, your father. I stayed silent. She continued. Here's the interesting part. I tracked down a minor car accident that happened in February of that year in a Portland suburb. A sedan skidded and hit a light pole. No major injuries, but the driver, Ryan Thompson, was taken to the ER due to dizziness. There's a hospital record, but no death report. I gripped my coffee cup tighter, saying nothing. Immediately after that accident, Linda went on, Ryan vanished from all contact. His phone was disconnected, his bank accounts were closed. At the same time, 2 large transfers were made from a subsidiary account of Miller Development to a newly opened account in Chicago under the name Ethan Caldwell. How much money? I asked. Lyndon looked up, eyes steady. $250,000. I felt my throat tighten. You mean, your father paid him to disappear, Linda confirmed. Change his name, change cities, change his life. And when things settled down, he returned. This time, as the future son-in-law of Vanessa. Collection of... I hadn't even realized my hands were clenched so tightly my knuckles had turned white. Linda handed me a printed sheet listing the transactions. The funds were routed through various shell companies, but the starting and ending points were clear. My father paid, Ryan or Ethan received. And does Ethan know his role in all this? I asked, my voice hoarse. I can't confirm all his initial motivations, Linda replied, but here's one key detail. When Ethan changed identities, he was assisted by someone named Benjamin Knox, a lawyer who handled internal contracts at Miller Development. He's the one who arranged the new bank accounts, the new employment records, and helped him reappear just around the time Vanessa started dating. I felt like I was staring at my entire life through a distorted jigsaw puzzle. My love, what I thought was the greatest loss I'd ever suffered, was actually a business transaction. A backroom deal between powerful men where emotions and trust were just loose ends to be cut off. What do you want to do next? Linda asked, her voice calm but cautious. I didn't answer right away. I looked down at the transaction list again, then looked up, my voice firmer than ever. I want to find out who else in my family knew about this besides my father, and I want to know why they let him step into my sister's life, as if he hadn't destroyed mine. Linda nodded and began gathering the papers. I'll keep digging, but from now on you need to be careful. If this explodes the wrong way, they'll try to silence you. I smiled, but not out of relief. It was the smile of someone who had just touched a rotting truth buried for 6 years. I received an email from Harold Jennings on a Monday afternoon while sitting at the public library combing through my father's financial records for inconsistencies. The subject line was brief. Ruby, about your grandmother Eleanor. My heart sank when I saw her name. Of all the losses in my life, Eleanor's passing weighed heaviest on me. She was my mother's mother, the only one in the family who ever hugged me when I cried at the dinner table because my father had scolded me, the one who taught me how to bake apple pie, mend dresses, and write my first handwritten letters. She lived alone in Vermont after my mother passed away in a charming wooden cottage tucked beneath a grove of maples. I used to visit every summer until my father suggested I focus on school and then made excuses to keep me away. Harold had been her personal attorney. I remembered him, a tall man who spoke slowly and used to give me mint candies during meetings when I was little. After her funeral, he vanished from all family communication. When I asked about him, my father simply said he'd retired. I opened the email and read it slowly. Dear Ruby, I hope this finds you well. I hesitated for a long time before writing this, knowing what I'm about to share may reopen old wounds. But I can no longer carry the silence I've held over the years, especially now that a colleague recently informed me of your family's asset situation, which I suspect is tied to the will your grandmother, Eleanor, left behind. The original version of her will, the one I personally drafted under her instruction in the summer of 2018, explicitly stated that the entire Vermont cottage, along with a $1 million trust in the Brookside Fund, be left to you, Ruby Miller, her only granddaughter. She was adamant that this inheritance remain on your mother's side and not fall under your father's control. However, after her passing, I was removed from the probate process by your family, specifically Mr. Charles Miller. A revised version was submitted to the court, naming Vanessa Miller as the sole beneficiary. I never saw the original presented in court. I believe Eleanor was manipulated in her final days as her health declined and she relied on caregivers appointed by the family. I still have a notarized copy of the original will, fully signed and witnessed. If you need it, I am willing to provide it and testify if necessary. At the bottom was his phone number, the address of his old office, and one final line: I've always believed Eleanor wanted you to know the truth. I read the letter 3 times. For a brief moment, I couldn't breathe. I thought of the wooden house with the porch full of chrysanthemums, where she always kept a warm quilt ready for me, even when I never told her I was coming. I remembered her placing her hand on my forehead and whispering, "You are the best part left of your mother. I just want you to be safe." And they took all of it, not just the memories, but the last protection she tried to leave behind. I called Harold that same evening. His voice was still slow, but steady. "Your grandmother didn't trust anyone on your father's side, Ruby. In her final years, she tried to stay in touch with you, but was blocked. She said she was afraid that if she didn't move fast enough, her estate would be stolen." "And it was," I said, my voice cracking. Harold paused, then said, "I'm not surprised, but I'm sorry I couldn't do more back then." "Why didn't you contact me sooner?" I asked. "I was at the funeral. I signed the notification papers." "I was barred from contacting you. They sent a letter denying all communication, claiming you no longer cared about the inheritance and had granted full authority to Mr. Charles Miller." "I never did that." "I know. But at the time, I couldn't prove otherwise. I kept the copy, waiting for the right moment." I closed my eyes, feeling blood rush to my temples. It all aligned too perfectly. The will was changed just 2 weeks after my father declared Ryan dead. Everything felt orchestrated, designed to strike 2 blows at once. Take the man I loved, then erase the last sacred piece of my mother and grandmother's legacy. "Can you send me the copy?" I asked. "I'll overnight the notarized version tomorrow morning. I've also contacted an attorney who specializes in contested wills. If you want to pursue legal action, I can testify that your grandmother was fully lucid when she signed the original." I thanked him. After hanging up, I sat quietly in the dark, the glow of streetlights casting pale streaks across the ceiling. My grandmother's words echoed in my mind. "Not everyone who wears a suit is kind. Not everyone who smiles loves you." I was too young to understand it then. Now, I understood all too well. I opened a drawer and took out the small box that held the old postcards my grandmother used to send me. Every single one was handwritten, each ending with the same line: "I love you, Ruby. Always remember you belong to the light." I would remember that, and I wouldn't let anyone steal that light from me ever again. It took me 2 weeks to prepare for that silent confrontation, not through shouting or accusations, but with a plan crafted down to the smallest detail. I hired an anonymous web designer, bought an encrypted domain with an IP address registered in Iceland, and built a secure hosting platform that contained everything I'd gathered: legal documents, a copy of the original will, transfer receipts, and, most importantly, the audio recordings I was about to obtain. I created a new LinkedIn identity: Rachel Morrison, private investor based in Denver, seeking scalable real estate tech ventures on the West Coast. I used a stock photo of a free-use model as the profile picture, tweaked just enough to avoid easy tracing. Then I began connecting with people in the industry, including one very familiar name, Ethan Caldwell. It took him a few days to accept the connection request. I wasn't surprised. Ryan had always been cautious around strangers, especially in business settings. but I'd only needed the door to open once. I'd walk right in. I found a tech networking event scheduled in San Jose where Rensys Property Tech was listed as one of the sponsors. I registered under the alias Rachel Morrison, printed a name tag, bought a business suit just expensive enough to blend in but not flashy, and rehearsed my voice in the mirror for 3 nights. Learning to control my expression, to keep my eyes steady when facing the man I once thought would be in my life forever. The event was held in a high-end hotel in a small ballroom elegantly arranged, the warm lighting softening the quiet tension behind most conversations. I walked in, kept my posture upright, my smile restrained. I spotted Ethan in the far right corner of the room, holding a champagne glass, speaking to an older woman in a blue blazer. My heartbeat slowed. I approached just as the woman walked away. I extended my hand. Hi there, I'm Rachel Morrison. I was really impressed by your presentation on integrated technology and property management. Ethan turned, shook my hand. His eyes were still sharp, just as I remembered, but there wasn't a flicker of recognition. Nice to meet you. Rachel, was it? What fund are you with? I'm independent. I used to be with Colorado Capital, but now I'm building my own portfolio. We spoke for a few minutes about the market, about the distributed data model he'd pitched. I barely listened. I focused on his expressions, his tone, how he showed no sign of realizing that the woman standing in front of him was the same one he once kissed beneath the yellow light of a kitchen lamp, the same woman he held when I broke down after losing my mother. Not a frown, not a pause, as if I never existed. I shifted slightly, angling the lipstick-shaped voice recorder inside my blazer toward him. I heard Rensys is backed heavily by Miller Development. How's that partnership going? He gave a faint smile and raised his glass. Charles saw the potential early. This project wouldn't exist without him. I've heard he's selective with partners. Extremely, especially in deals involving family. I looked up, keeping my face neutral. What do you mean by that? Ethan shrugged. Just a figure of speech. It's all strategic. The less emotion involved, the better. I swallowed hard. His voice was the same deep tone I remembered, but every word now carried the chill of cold, calculating detachment. I pressed on, keeping my tone light. Do you see yourself expanding into the East Coast? Vermont, maybe? He paused for less than a second, but I saw it. Possibly, he said, quickly pivoting. Would you like to meet my technical team? They're in the next booth. I'll swing by later, I replied. Thanks, Ethan. Hope we get a chance to work together. I walked away, straight out of the room, spine still stiff, until I reached the downstairs restroom. There, I leaned against the sink, hands cold and shaking. I plugged in my earbuds and played back the clip I'd just recorded. His voice rang out, clear. Charles saw the potential early. This project wouldn't exist without him. The less emotion involved, the better. I saved the file, encrypted it, and uploaded it immediately to the secure website I'd built. A line appeared, file saved, timestamp 10:42 a.m., minus San Jose Networking Summit. The next day, I met with Julia Chan, my father's former assistant, who had been abruptly fired last year. I called her from a private number and arranged to meet at an old bookstore. Julia had witnessed far too much in the Miller household and never dared speak. But today, when I placed the original will and Ethan's recording in front of her, her eyes changed. You know they planned this a long time ago, right? Julia said softly but with conviction. I need proof, I replied. Emails, documents, anything that shows I wasn't removed from this life by chance. Julia sighed. I kept copies of some internal emails. There's a link between Ethan's disappearance and the initial investment the company made into Rensys. I'll send them to you tonight. But be careful. They don't play nice when they feel cornered. I nodded. We didn't shake hands or say goodbye, just a brief look, like two people who had shared a truth too heavy for words. That night, I stayed up reorganizing the entire data system. On the dark screen, the folder titled Truth Vault slowly filled up, each file, each statement, each recording, coming together into a picture that was terrifying in its clarity. A life scripted, A daughter erased. A pre-written play in which I was just the crossed-out character. But this time, I was holding the pen, and I would rewrite everything. I didn't send a letter full of anger. I sent a formal demand for restitution, signed by an independent attorney, neutral in tone but leaving no room for loopholes. In it, I gave my father and Vanessa 10 days to admit to the theft, the emotional fraud, and the violation of a dying woman's will. If they refused, I would release the full body of evidence, including one sealed copy delivered to the office of Attorney Harold Jennings. 4 days later, I received a call from an unknown number. His voice was unchanged, deep calm, laced with that familiar disdain. "Ruby, I'm not surprised you chose this route, but I suggest you stop. What you're doing will only create chaos, and no one will believe a daughter who lives in isolation, clearly unstable." I let the silence hang a few seconds before replying with a dry smile. "Did you forget? I graduated top of my class in psychology at Stanford. If anyone understands emotional manipulation, it's me." He paused, then hung up. That night, I wrote a long email to Karen Moore, a veteran investigative journalist at the New York Times, the same woman who brought down an entire insurance firm through her expose on financial abuse in families. I didn't just email her. I sent her an entire dossier: the original will, Julia Chan's email thread, Ethan's voice recording, banking transfers, and an old video of Ryan holding me on the college quad the day he proposed in front of the lecture hall, under the golden light of a May afternoon. I'd kept that video for 7 years on a backup drive, never daring to watch it again. But now, it wasn't a private memory, it was evidence. Karen replied in under 24 hours. She called me directly, her voice clear, sharp as a scalpel. "Ruby, I've reviewed everything. I need to verify a few documents, but if what you're saying is true, this isn't just about stolen inheritance. This is a network of emotional manipulation, reputation destruction, and familial power seizure, a form of abuse that rarely gets covered but is everywhere." I arranged to meet her over the weekend at a small coffee shop near the newsroom, but before that, there was one person I needed to send that video to. I chose a short clip the moment Ryan looked at me, smiled, and whispered, "I'll never leave you." I sent it to Vanessa via text with just one line: "I hope you now know who he made that promise to first." 5 minutes later, she video called me. I didn't answer. 15 minutes after that, the messages flooded in. "What the hell is this, Ruby? Did you make this up? Ryan says you're paranoid, that you're trying to ruin my life. Is that it?" I didn't respond. Instead, I forwarded an email with 4 attached audio files of Ryan speaking to me, to Julia, and to the internal accountant, where he never denied changing his identity, never refuted using his past relationship with me to get close to my father for funding. By midnight, Vanessa's messages had shifted tone. "You know Dad forced me to marry him, right? I never wanted this. I knew about Ryan before. I thought you'd forgotten. I'm sorry." I read each line, my stomach tightening. I couldn't tell if I should pity her or feel angry. She wasn't the only victim, but she definitely wasn't innocent. The next morning, Karen emailed to say the first article had been approved. The headline was still under wraps, but the main story would expose financial manipulation within upper-class families on the East Coast, referencing a prominent real estate dynasty with exclusive, never-before-seen evidence. I printed the article, slipped it into an envelope, and sent it via express delivery to the Miller Development Office. On the front, I wrote, "To Mr. Charles Miller, from the daughter you once declared didn't exist." I included an old photo, me and my mother on my 7th birthday, with a handwritten note from her in blue ink. "No matter who leaves you, I will never let you walk through the dark alone." I stood in front of the mirror, staring into my own eyes. I was no longer the college girl shattered by a fake funeral, no longer the daughter abandoned on the day her mother died. I was a survivor, and it was time the truth was known. The ceremony was rescheduled for a Saturday afternoon in early June, held at a seaside hotel campus in Rhode Island. Close to 200 guests were invited, mostly business partners, investors, media, and family friends of Charles Miller. They called it a reputation restoration wedding after the live stream technical issues 2 weeks ago, but everyone knew it was a smokescreen for the rumors that had been swirling nonstop. I wasn't there. I was at my apartment in San Francisco watching the clock strike 6 o'clock, then unlocking my phone. A video, exactly 32 seconds long, sent from me, was programmed to play on the large LED screen behind the stage the moment Vanessa took the mic. The tech handler was someone from the event planning crew I'd connected with earlier, compensated handsomely, but worth every cent. On stage, adorned with white flowers and warm amber lighting, Vanessa appeared in a Vera Wang gown. She looked tired, but her eyes weren't clouded by ignorance anymore. They held the resolve of someone about to tear through a veil of lies. Holding the mic in both hands, she took a deep breath and looked out at the crowd. Before we officially begin, I'd like to share a short video, a family memory, she said. No one suspected anything. Soft applause followed. The screen lit up. Bathed in the golden sunlight of Oregon's campus, a young woman embraced a young man, tears silently streaming as he knelt and offered a silver ring. His voice rang clear from the camera. I promise, no matter what happens, I will never disappear from your life. No one spoke. The room fell completely still. Then someone near the front whispered, "Oh God, that's Ethan." A beat later, chaos erupted. Ryan, or rather Ethan Caldwell, stood frozen in the aisle. His face went pale, his eyes locked on the screen before turning to Vanessa. But she wasn't looking at him. She bowed her head, returned the mic to the coordinator, and walked off the stage with her back straight. Ryan called out, "Vanessa, it's not what you think. Please, just let me explain." But Vanessa didn't stop. "You had a chance to tell the truth 7 years ago. You chose money. You chose my father. And now you have nothing left to explain." She passed the front row, where Charles Miller sat, his face ashen, hands gripping the armrests. As Vanessa approached, he reached out, as if to stop her. She only said, in a voice low enough that only those nearby could hear, but caught clearly by the camera's lip-reading AI, "You no longer get to control my life." Ryan bolted from the stage, disappearing through a side door. The cameras couldn't keep up. Back in my apartment, I watched the live stream unfold on social media, feeling neither triumphant nor heartbroken. Only a stillness, like a lake after a heavy storm. The masks had fallen, and they were the ones who pulled them off. That night, the first digital headlines appeared. CEO Charles Miller accused of manipulating will, faking boyfriend's death to sever daughter's relationship. Another read, Ruby Miller's former fiancé, now sister's groom exposed in shocking twist. Karen Moore from the New York Times published the first in her investigative series, The Tyranny Behind the Estate Gates, a family scandal uncovered. Miller development stock plunged 18% that day, continuing to decline in the following week. Major investors, including a Canadian fund and a Boston trust, announced immediate withdrawals. One hotel chain, backed by Charles, also froze their partnership. Online, hundreds of comments poured in. Many couldn't believe a family that appeared so respectable could orchestrate a years-long charade. But just as many shared their own stories, being cut out of wills, disowned for loving the wrong person, or being cast aside for not staying silent. I read each one. I didn't reply, I just took note. The next day, Attorney Harold called me, his voice steadier now after the emotional storm. "You've done something most people never dare, Ruby. You brought the truth into the light, with evidence, not just words. Now the law will take its course. Are you ready?" I nodded. "I've been ready since the day they told me Ryan was dead." 1 week after the wedding fell apart, I got a call from Harold Jennings' office. His tone was calm but unmistakably resolute, like each word was carrying a long overdue affirmation. "The court has validated the original will. Ruby, you are now the sole legal heir of Eleanor Miller's estate, including the Vermont home and the remaining trust fund, just under $1.2 million. I sat in silence long after the call ended. My tiny San Francisco apartment was still the same. Exposed brick wall, walnut bookshelf, the rocking chair where I used to read Grandma's letters during college. In one she wrote, "If the world ever feels like it's turning against you, Come back to where love was never conditional. I folded the letter, slipped it into a leather pouch, and began to pack. The next afternoon, a cream-colored envelope was left outside my door. No return address. On the front, my name written in lilac ink, slightly slanted. Familiar. I opened it. Inside was a 2-page handwritten letter. Dear Ruby, if you're reading this, it means things have spiraled out of control. I don't know where to begin. All I know is that growing up, I believed you left our family on your own, cutting contact for some reckless love story. I never knew Ryan was the man you were once engaged to. I only knew I loved him as honestly as I could, and I believed he was the only one who ever truly saw me. I felt like I'd been split in two, not just because of the betrayal, but because I realized I'd been a pawn in a game I never agreed to play. Dad never told me anything about your past. He just said, Ruby is weak. Ruby isn't stable enough to hold on to what matters. I believed him. And I was wrong. I know an apology can't erase what you went through, but if you ever can, I hope that one day, when the winter wind moves through the pines in Vermont, you'll remember that at least one person in this family saw you, and regrets not getting closer sooner. Vanessa. I folded the letter, not crying, not smiling, just feeling a weight in my chest I didn't yet have a name for. Forgiveness isn't about acceptance. It's about choosing not to be shackled to someone else's wound anymore. I placed the letter into a small wooden box, locked it, and continued packing. A few days later, the federal court officially announced an investigation into Ryan Caldwell for identity fraud, asset concealment, and falsifying personal records when establishing his company. He disappeared from the media, withdrew from his executive role. The startup fell into the hands of new investors, ones who wanted nothing to do with a scandal that was both ethical and legal in scale. Everything ended with an eerie quiet. As for me, with the entire inheritance from my grandmother, I didn't buy a luxury car, nor did I move into a penthouse overlooking the ocean. Instead, I founded the Eleanor Fund, a small legal foundation supporting women who had been cut out of family estates or financially manipulated under the guise of love. The first legal team I hired included 3 people: a former prosecutor, an estate lawyer, and a social worker who had grown up in the foster care system. On moving day, the 3-story wooden house tucked beside the maple woods in Vermont had already been carefully restored by Harold. Every detail my grandmother left behind preserved: the floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, the gray stone, wood-burning stove, and the little fireplace beside the living room. I rehung the black and white photograph of her, the one where she sat beside her old bicycle, her eyes full of mischief, right above the fireplace. The scent of burning pine filled the room. I placed my hand on the frame, tilted my head slightly, and whispered like a quiet prayer, I'm home now. Outside, snow had begun to drift across the wooden porch. I wrapped myself in a coat, poured a cup of hot tea, opened the door, and stepped onto the deck, settling into the rocking chair Grandma used to sit in every evening. In that moment, there was no betrayal, no bitterness, only the cold wind, the scent of chamomile, and the crackle of the fireplace echoing through the slightly ajar door. Life will always throw us into unexpected turns, and sometimes the truths we need to hear are hidden by the very people we trust the most. But I believe that no matter how far we're cast away, all of us will one day find our way back to the place we truly belong. Whether it's a quiet house in the Vermont woods or a sense of peace deep inside after years of pain. But what about you? Have you ever felt deceived by the very people who were supposed to love you? Have you ever had to fight for justice on your own because no one else would stand beside you? If this story reminded you of yourself or someone you once knew, leave a comment below. I'd truly love to hear your thoughts and experiences. And if you'd like to continue walking with me through more real, emotional stories about family, loss, and the journey to reclaim your voice, don't forget to follow the channel. The next episodes will bring you different slices of life where every secret revealed isn't just about revenge, but about healing. Thank you for listening.